Let's get reaction to those harsh comments coming from the U.S. from James Corbett, editor of the independent news and information website, The Corbett Report. Thanks for being with us again, James. Russia and China will pay a price. What exactly does Secretary Clinton mean by that, do you think? And do you think that those words could possibly turn into action?
Well, they are just words, but given that the diplomats' stock and trade are words, that's a pretty serious game of one-upsmanship that Clinton seems to be playing right now, and that's a pretty heated comment to make, especially in the midst of an international crisis like this. And I suppose the upside for those who are opposed to United States unilateral action around the globe, and I suppose the downside for people who are in favor of that, is that it seems that the U.S. isn't really able to transform those words into actions by themselves. So I think tellingly, Clinton also went on to call for the 60 other nations in the so-called Friends of Syria group to join in on the action and to make sure that Russia and China understand that they will feel some sort of blowback from their actions in Syria, which I think indicates that really the U.S. doesn't have much diplomatic leverage to use directly against Russia and China. All they can do is try to convince other nations to reduce trade, etc. So at this point, it's very unlikely that these words will directly translate into U.S. action of some sort. But it is, I think, a very dangerous game for the U.S. to be playing to make such politically explosive statements in the midst of an international crisis.
And really, she didn't just say that Russia and China will pay, but she said that everyone at that Friends of Syria's meeting supports that very strongly. She really is accusing the countries, both of the countries, of standing up for the Assad regime and therefore blockading progress in the conflict. How fair do you think that assessment is?
Well, it's a case of the pot calling the kettle black, especially after the New York Times report that came out a few weeks ago confirming that the CIA was aiding and arming the Syrian rebels and was actively involved in ensconcing some of their members in Turkey across the border. And after a Time magazine report that confirmed $72 million in State Department funding that has gone to the arming and training the Syrian rebels. So to make the basis of this charge simply that Russia and China are in some way aiding, in some nebulous and undefined way, aiding the al-Assad regime, kind of goes to show that they don't have a lot of, I suppose, ammunition to use in that charge. Whereas I think all of the evidence stacks up on the other side that the so-called Friends of Syria have been actively involved in arming and training and funding the opposition since the onset of this crisis, if not before.
It seemed, though, that last week we had progress. The Geneva meeting saw the world really unite on Russia's long-held position that pressure should be put on both sides of the Syrian crisis. Why, just a week later, are the Friends of Syria not sticking to that? It seems like we're making a circle here.
Right. Well, that seeming turnaround would be absolutely bewildering if there was the sense that whatever agreement was reached last week was really what the so-called Friends of Syria actually want to play out in Syria. I think what this does is it goes to show yet again, if any more indications were needed, that from the outset of this entire crisis, the end game, the end goal has been to remove al-Assad, his government. So I just don't think that this is truly a negotiation process, and we've seen the lie being given time and time again with the Kofi peace deal and what happened in Geneva last week, and now with these comments, once again, it's turning to the cold fact that the only way out for the Friends of Syria and the only thing that they've offered on the table so far is for al-Assad to step down, and it looks like they're not going to stop until that happens.
Just briefly, do you think that the Friends of Syria, I should say, and their support could be, we could see any better alternatives to lead the country?
In terms of the people that the Friends of Syria are supporting?
In terms of what they're proposing.
I see. Well, I just don't. I don't think that the what's on the table right now would be an acceptable solution in terms of resolving the conflict. Because, of course, if the entire aim is to simply replace the government with the armed opposition that's fighting against it right now, then since that opposition consists of Sunnis, I think what we would inevitably see play out is a strong reaction and a potential massacre of Shiites and Alawites, not to mention the Syrian Christian population. So I think there has to be a solution that can involve some sort of power balance that does not mean that there will be a reaction against the other groups. And this is obviously something that's extremely difficult to achieve. I mean, so much hangs in the balance that it's really quite remarkable that, for example, Clinton would be making these types of remarks right now, especially when, without the aid of Russia and China, that type of negotiated balanced settlement is absolutely impossible. So it's particularly bewildering that these comments would be made right now.
I just want to touch on one more thing that Clinton spoke about briefly. She made an explicit mention of Syria's chemical weapons, given that they've certainly not been used in this conflict, and it's a pretty well-known fact, really. Why do you think she even brought them up?
Once again, it could be placing a script. I mean, we've had indications for a while now that that there has been an alternative plan being proposed that will involve cutting off Syrian television outlets and staging a fake coup of sorts. Basically putting forward to the public that that generals are defecting and the like without that actually taking place, a type of psyop. And if that's part of the plan, then certainly mentioning chemical weapons, etc., could be used as a setup towards facilitating some sort of false flag to be blamed on the Assad government.
Well, the rhetoric certainly is heating up. James Corbett, editor of the Corbett Report, thanks very much for your input.
You're welcome.